So the title of our today's class, the nature of approaches and methods in ELT. What we are going to do today, that means we will try to have the definition of approaches and methods in English language teaching. And we will also try to have an understanding that why there are many methods and approaches in English language teaching. Why? There is not only one method and approach in ELT. And we will also try to have other circumstances, that what is the historical background of approaches and methods in English language teaching, and why one approach or one method has been changed to a second method or third method or fourth method, like that. Actually, ELT stands for English language teaching. If we generally argue that for teaching and learning English language, there should be one method or one approach. But actually, we see several methods and several approaches in English language teaching. Okay, we will have a look. Okay, and we said that in our first class, that is, in this world, there are 7,000 languages, but all languages are not used as the global language. Up to the 14th century, 15th century, even 16th century, 17th century, there was a method that was applied to teach English language, that is called the grammar translation method. That means up to the 90s or towards the ending period of 18th century, we had only one method. That method we know, that is grammar translation method. Even in Bangladesh, that is up to 1986, we followed this method, grammar translation method. And then in our national curriculum, that means we shifted from grammar translation method to CLT, that means communicative language teaching. It is not a method, it is an approach. So we'll try to have a look, what is the reason? What is the background, why we use so many methods in English language teaching? So that I was talking, that is, grammar translation method is an old method. It is a classical method. It means that from 14th century towards the end of 19th century, that grammar translation method was used for English language teaching. And what do we do, and how to do in case of English language?
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
So what I was talking, that means traditionally for many years, in case of Bangladesh or in case of all over the world, we use one method, and that method is grammar translation method. And even in Bangladesh, we had been following grammar translation method for a long time. And towards the 1986, up to 1986, we had been following grammar translation method. And towards the beginning of 1990, we started following another approach on methods. So why such kind of initiatives were taken in case of English language teaching, that we will try to explain. So actually, in 1920 decades, determination of reading goals and how to read and what to read in ELT principle was developed in American school and colleges. Okay, so before 1920s, grammar translation method had been used as the only one method of English language teaching, but that method got questioned in 1920 decades. For what? So what is the reason in case of having questions on grammar translation method? Why? Because linguists and psychologists developed theories for philosophical and the practical needs of ELT. Practical need, that means grammar translation method, we had been following grammar translation, and we try to learn language. But in case of 1920 decades, we have had the necessity of communicative approach. We had so many people all over the world. They started to move from one place to another place, and they had the necessity to communicate. In case of grammar translation method, we will have the fluency for writing. We will be an efficient writer. We will have an efficient reader. But in case of communicative perspectives, grammar translation method was in lack. And for this reason, in 1920 decades, the philologists, and the linguists, they thought the necessity of communication in case of language learning. That means, why do we learn language? In 1920 decades, we perceived that we learn language for the benefit of communication. So we can write properly, but if we can't communicate the oral communication, that would be a leakage or lackage of English language learning or English language teaching. So they thought the communicative perspectives of English language teaching. So that means the American linguists, they thought to have a change in case of English language teaching and learning. For what? For to enhance the communicative skill of the target language we are learning. And they proposed, these psychologists and linguists, they proposed several reforms in English language teaching and learning. And in 1940 decades, there had another great change. That means that applied linguistics comes up, a new field of ELT thinking, that approaches and methods are the chief principle in which we have to give emphasis on. So applied linguistics, that means the study of language, and applied linguistics, it means that we have to learn language, and our learning should be applied in our practical field. That can be called the applied linguistics. Okay, so that demand came in existence in 1940 decades. So we proceed on that. So when applied linguistics came into existence in 1940 decades, various attempts have been made to understand the nature of methods, to explore the relationship between approach and methods. Okay, so then we had a necessity to understand what is an approach and what is a method.
Sir.
Yeah. Rumi Akhtar?
Yes, sir.
What is your question?
Sir.
Yes? I can hear you. So in case of applied linguistics, that we have understood that there should have a linkage between approach and method in 1940 decades. And then in case of developing the communicative skill on language in the late 19th century or the first half of 20th century, linguists and language specialists tried to understand the scenario. What is the scenario? That means how languages are learned by children. So they observe and they start researching. That means children learn language. So what is the necessity and in which way children learn language? They don't learn grammar. Children do not learn grammar. Children do not learn translation, but in which way their children learn language? So that was a question. That means linguists started to think how learning language is represented and organized in human brain or memory. Okay, so again, psychological perspectives of language learning was developed. That means how brain can catch a language, if it is the first language or it is the second language. That means intervention of human memory, intervention of human psychology was applied in case of language learning and teaching. And language is structured like human brain or memory. In which way? Okay, so that question came into existence. Okay, and in this regard, some psychologists and many linguists, they come up with their proposition. And in case of English philologists, phoneticians, and grammarian, Henry Sweet, and he was a specialist in grammar language, particularly in Old English and Old Norse. And he published many books on language teaching and languages, and he remained influential for his contribution to language learning. This man, this philologist, Henry Sweet. So he thought, and we came to know another name in this philologist or linguist, that is Danish linguist Otto Jespersen. And Otto Jespersen is especially famous for the grammar of language use, and one of the greatest language scholar of the 19th and 20th century. Okay, so Danish linguist Otto Jespersen, and we have also
sorry to
got,
interrupt, sir. ঠিক মতো English শুনতে পাচ্ছি না, sir. Sir,
yes,
একটা clearly শোনা যাচ্ছে না.
okay, so English philologist Henry Sweet, and then
Or maybe a network problem.
yeah, okay, so that is the benefits of online class. Okay, suppose it will be okay. Okay, probably so we were talking in such a way that is, in 1920-40 decades, linguists and philologists, they thought to change language teaching approach. And in these perspectives, we have got two linguists, that is Henry Sweet, English philologist, and another Danish linguist, Otto Jespersen. Jespersen talked about the grammar in English, and Henry Sweet also. We have got another linguist, that is Harold Palmer, and he was interested in the method that fulfilled the requirement, that is dedicated himself to oral method. That means grammar translation method got questioned. That means in grammar translation method, we didn't have the oral proficiency. So this linguist, Harold Palmer, he talked about the oral method. That means how we can enrich our communicative skill in case of language teaching. And as we have said, that at that time, that applied linguistics also developed its scenario. Right? Naid Hassan, কিছু বলতে চাচ্ছিলেন?
স্যার সরি ফর ইন্টারাপ্টিং স্যার, আপনার মানে কথাটা আমরা একটু আস্তে আস্তে শুনতে পাচ্ছি, বুঝছেন?
বোঝা যাচ্ছে তো কথা? কথা আস্তে শুনে গেলেও বোঝা যাচ্ছে? হ্যাঁ, হ্যালো,
আপনার কথা একটু মানে একটু কম লাউড হচ্ছে স্যার, মানে একটু আস্তে আস্তে কথাগুলো শোনা যাচ্ছে,
কেটে কেটে যাচ্ছে,
মানে কেটে কেটে আসছে হয়তো স্যার।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, তাহলে যেটা করতে পারি, মানে আমাকে হচ্ছে স্লো বলতে হবে হয়তো, তাহলে হয়তো নেটওয়ার্কটা ঠিক হবে। ওকে, সো
আই থিংক নেটওয়ার্ক প্রবলেম স্যার।
হ্যাঁ, নেটওয়ার্কেরই প্রবলেম এখন, অনলাইন ক্লাস তাছাড়া। হ্যাঁ, অ্যাকচুয়ালি I am speaking slowly then, so that you can hear me clearly. So so we had been talking the importance of communicative language teaching, and Harold Palmer, he dedicated himself to oral method. Okay, that means how we can develop our oral proficiency. That is his concern. And Harold Palmer, he born in London, he studied in France, and he went to Belgium, he studied English there, and he established a Barlis school over there. And next time, he established his own English Research Institute and a bulletin. Okay, that means Harold Palmer tried to put his emphasis on oral communication. That means up to the 1940 decades, we didn't have that oral proficiency that we were in need. Okay, so Harold Palmer did that. Okay. And Harold Palmer also contributed thousands word English with A.S. Hornby. So that is their contribution. So our concern is that these three linguists develop principles and theories as to design Indian language teaching program, process and course materials. Why they develop? We had the context. That means grammar translation method was only method, but grammar translation method wouldn't fulfill the necessity of the present second language learner. That means the communicative practice. So they develop some programs, courses and course materials, and they can be applied in practical English language teaching. So according to these three linguists, Harold Palmer, Henry Sweet, and Jesperson. So, so another thing is that there should be a linkage between philosophy of language teaching theory and principle. And in 1963, American applied linguist Edward Anthony tried to find out the relation between these materials, okay, that is language teaching theories and methods. And Edward Anthony gave the linkage, that means through the gradual development. He said that several levels of conceptualization between language teaching theories and practice. And he put this term that we are going to discuss, that is approach, method, and technique. Okay, so who said that? That is Edward Anthony. And Edward Anthony got this appreciation from his previous linguist and philologist. They thought that we should enrich our communicative competence. So what is an approach then? If we in a position, that means then we can define approach in such a way that is a set of correlative assumption dealing with the nature of language teaching and learning. Okay, and an approach is axiomatic and it describes the nature of language to be taught. Okay, so approach is a way that through which we can understand a language. In which way? That means if we go to assumption, means that is we think that children learn language without learning grammar. Okay, but assumption is that if we think that listening improves our speaking, that is our assumption, and that assumption can be next time established. That is, we all are agreed that we learn language by listening. So that assumption is next time become axiomatic. That means everybody is agreed that we learn language by listening. So approach is the theoretical underpinning of language learning. Okay, that means and it is admitted by everyone. That means we learn language by listening. Okay, so that can be called, or that can be defined approach in such a way. If we move forward, approach is the theory, and method, a plan for serial presentation of language teaching materials. Okay, so language teaching materials will not contradict each other. So if and different sets of language teaching materials are for different approaches. Okay, so method is procedural. Okay, and if we go forward, that means we see another portion, that is technique. Technique, the implementation key which take place in the classroom. That means a particular trick, stratagem or contrivance used to accomplish language learning. So there is a relation between approach, method, and technique. Approach can be called theory in language teaching. Method can be called the way we will apply that theory, and technique can be the classroom activities. We will apply that approach and method in the classroom. Just we can have an example that will make your idea clear. Okay. So approach, what is approach? Language, we learn language by listening. That is the approach. So if we admit that we learn language by approach, what is the method? In order to increase our listening capability, we will listening music will help language learning. Okay. So you can also, method can also be that watching movies will help language learning. And through watching movies, we can also listen the movie wording, and for this reason, that can be the method. And the technique, play music at the classroom. Okay, so technique is the strategy or the class activities. Method is the way we will apply the approach. So that is the definition of approach, methods, and techniques. So very frankly, approach is the theoretical underpinning of language learning. Method is the way how we can apply the theory, and technique is the classroom activities or other activities we can do for learning language. So these are the relation between approach, methods, and techniques. Okay. Here, Edward Anthony, that means he came up with this term, approach, methods, and techniques. He has, according to Edward Anthony, he said that approach is the level at which assumption and beliefs about language and language learning are specified. That is the theory. Method is the level at which theory is put into practice, at which choices are made about the particular school to be taught and the content to be taught and the order in which the content will be presented. That is the technique. So that is the relation between approach, method, and technique. Anthony's model serves the clear distinction between theories and practices. So we have language theory and we have language practice. And in case of Anthony's model of approach, method, and technique, we can have that in case of language learning, we need theory, and not only the theory, we have to practice the theory in classroom. And for this reason, we say that language teaching reforms movement, it is an approach. Direct method, that is derived from the approach, that is, so language teaching reform movement, that was an approach, that is the theory, that is the philosophical theoretical observation in case of language teaching and learning. And direct method derived from the approach. What is direct method? We will have different class on this method, that is the direct method. And the classroom activities, the techniques. Okay, so the difference is subtle, but you can understand generally that you will say that approach is the theory, method is the way to apply the theory, and classroom activities, the techniques. That is the relation between approach, methods, and techniques. In 1965, we have got other proposal for language teaching reform. We have got here a Canadian linguist, William Francis McCain, and in his book, Language Teaching Analysis, mentions language teaching on the dimension of escalation, gradation, presentation, and repetition in method. So up to this, only this man called about the Harold Palmer. He talked about the oral approach. And after this foundation, that is Anthony proposed this approach and methods. But after that, this man, this Canadian linguist, he came up with the dimension of other language teaching, that is selection. How we'll select the technique, classroom technique. How we'll grade the technique. That means in which class, what materials we will be using. And also presentation. What will be the presentation criteria and the repetition in method. So this Canadian linguist, he came up with his idea that language can be learned through this dimension, that is selection, gradation, presentation, and repetition. And Mackey's book is primarily concerned with the language teaching textbook and their organization. So here about the text, that means we follow in case of English language teaching and learning. However, Mackey's model fails to address the level of approach to address the actual classroom behavior of the teachers and learners. So up to that, we have missed another thing. So that is, what is the thing? That what should be the role of a teacher? What should be the role of a learner in case of English language teaching? That came into discussion whenever we have got so many idea of approach, methods, and techniques. Okay. So this thing also came into discussion, that what would be the role of a teacher, what would be the role of the learners. Okay, so in approach and methods, we will see all these criteria, okay, and that we have learned. So, however, Mackey's book served the material. What should we done in case of English language teaching? Anthony, in 1963, tried to simplify the language teaching theory